Just so you know, I am going to record the session. Can you still hear me? Oh, everyone's muted. Okay. I guess we'll give it a few minutes to see, I think a couple more people are joining. I think maybe one more person signed up. I see a few more names on the list since I last looked, so we'll just give those people a chance to join. I guess in the meantime, I can kind of ask, has anyone ever learned about UDL or heard of UDL in the past or have any experience? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, good. Well, hopefully in this session, even if you haven't heard of UDL, that you learn a little something new from this. If you've heard of the concept before, this could just be a good refresher for you. Just going over some best practices and some good strategies and methods for your own course. We have a couple more people joining. Let's see. Okay. I think we're waiting on one more person, but I'll just kind of get started a little bit. It's nice to meet everyone. I'm Brianna Van Buskirk, and I'm the new instructional designer. So I look forward to working with all of you. And hopefully you'll join me for some of my other sessions that we'll have before the fall semester. Let's see, it's 11:02. Maybe we'll wait till 1 or 2 more minutes. So during the session, feel free. I know everyone has their mic off. You don't necessarily have to have your video on. I'm going to switch to sharing my screen, so you won't be seeing my face the whole time. But yeah. I'm going to share my screen. So can everyone see my presentation, Universal Design for Learning here? Okay, perfect. Okay, so I guess I'll just jump in and we'll kind of get started. So today we're going to be talking about UDL. This is part 1 of a 3-part session series about UDL. Today we're going to be focusing on engagement. And as I mentioned before, some of these strategies you might find similar to things that you're already doing. But I do hope that you gain some new insights as well. And either way, it's just good to keep these concepts in mind, just a little refresher, some best practices. And really, there's an overall message behind UDL that I want to focus on during these sessions, and something we'll discuss throughout this presentation. And we'll kind of jump right into that. Okay, so By the end of this presentation, this session, you will be able to define UDL and identify the three principles, which are engagement, representation, and then action and expression. Today we're focusing on engagement. You're going to be able to analyze the structure and content of your own course in relation to student engagement and motivation. And then you'll be able to apply some teaching strategies and best practices in your own course to increase engagement. I tried to include some examples for your reference and for, just for you to implement in your own courses. So by definition, UDL is a framework that aims to improve and optimize your teaching for all people. And so I bolded all people because that's really kind of the underlying message of UDL, is that you want to accommodate all of your students and all of their different learning needs, because all students are different. And this is based on scientific insights on how we learn. UDL it's kind of like a way of thinking. It's a way of teaching that offers flexibility in the way that students access material, engage with it, and show what they know. And the goal, again, is to accommodate individual learning differences and to help give students the equal opportunity to succeed. So just in general, some common differences that we see in our students are age, cultural backgrounds, work experiences, time restraints, resources, and disabilities. And, a lot of times when you think of UDL and accommodating the different students and the different learning needs, a lot of people think of disabilities and, changing their class so that it's ADA compliant, and things like that. But really, throughout all humans and all people in general, we all have these common differences and things that we come to the table with, other than disabilities. So for example, your class can be just a UDL classroom, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's ADA compliant, although some of the same concepts apply to both. So for example, using closed captioning can help students who are deaf, those who are learning English, and even people who have different sleeping times. So adult learners who are married and, maybe someone's working late and they can't have the volume on and they're relying on that closed captioning. So again, just reiterating the point that it's not just making your course ADA compliant, but really focusing on the differences of all learners in general. So UDL is based on studies of neuroscience and the way humans learn. So there's 3 channels in the brain: the affective network, recognition network, and strategic network. And so there's these 3 broad networks of the brain, and students are learning through these 3 channels of the brain. So the affective network deals with the why of learning, which basically deals with caring about and prioritizing your work. Next is the recognition channel, or the what of learning, which is concerned with the content that's being presented, what resources are being provided to share the content knowledge. Like, how are you presenting the information to your students? How are you teaching them? What resources are they learning from? And then the next is the skills and strategies, or the how of learning, which is how students show what they understand or how they can apply the knowledge. And these correlate into the 3 principles of teaching. So that would be engagement, representation, and action and expression. So as a teacher, it's important to channel these 3 learning networks, and you want to do that by multiple means of engagement. So different ways of getting students excited about the work, because some things may excite a student more than another. So you're channeling different ways to engage your student. Multiple means of content representation. Um, you know, what adheres to all learners, providing different resources such as videos and readings and case studies and different resources that work better for some students rather than others, and accommodating to those different needs. And then varying the types of assignments that allow students to express their knowledge in the best way possible. So where some students may perform better in writing an essay, other students may, maybe do better creating a video or something like that. You're really trying to channel and focus on what shows off the student's skills in the best way possible. And a good way to summarize this is not one size fits all. Students engage in different ways, they comprehend information differently, and they perform differently depending on the assignment type. So what can you do to understand your students more and learn about their personal needs? So we know the general differences, but really to understand the learners in your own classroom, you can have a Google Meet and have a pre-course meeting. At Caldwell, I don't know that you can really require this other than the required sessions that you have during class, but it can be an optional meeting where you get to know the students and get to ask them about their needs. You get to set the expectations of the course and have a dialogue about that, and just get the chance for questions and suggestions from students that you can then implement into your class and do a little bit of revising based on that feedback. Using Google Forms, which is a good option. I mean, you can use other survey tools, but Google Forms is always great. You can have some surveys to get a sense of their experience and their background knowledge, their familiarity with the technology that you're going to be using, or their preferences in technology. And then what's really important, and I find most useful, is post-course surveys. So you would get student feedback from your course, asking what worked, what didn't, what improvements can be made, and then taking that and readjusting your class based on that feedback so that you can really adhere to the actual specific learning needs that you've found that work in your class. So it's very specific. And then also having your own survey, keeping track of that information so that you can make revisions going forward. And I think, this is very important after reflecting upon the class, to just kind of make those changes and continue improving your class. Some basic concepts, recruiting some interest before the course begins to get students engaged with the class. You may already be doing this, but maybe you have a welcome page with a welcome video. Getting them personalized with knowing about the class. You could have a pre-course syllabus quiz or a Blackboard quiz to get them initially engaged with the material. Making sure they understand what's laid out in the syllabus and the expectations, making sure they know how to use Blackboard and that they're not stalemated by the technology. Really great is to have an intro discussion board. You want to set up a sense of community in your class. So it's always great to kind of start getting the class discussion rolling and having students interacting with each other. Having the first assignment due sooner rather than later is always great, because you can get students the feedback that they need. If they, maybe they aren't interested in the class, they can add or drop at that point in time. But you really want to start off on the right foot and get them engaged with the material. And then providing a UDL syllabus, which we'll talk about here. I'm going to preface this by saying that these are some things that are relatable to engagement, representation, and action and expression. But so I'm just going to summarize these first, and then dive more into the engagement aspect. A UDL syllabus should highlight goals of the course, and not only highlight the goals, but talk about why the course material is relevant to the students, and giving them a sense of purpose and understanding. stating the objectives and directly relating them to the assignments, and again understanding the purpose. So it's always important. I recommend writing out your assignment description and then right under it, relating it to the purpose, and just kind of explicitly stating the purpose, along with the objectives of the assignment. You want to be clear and make it obvious to students that there's going to be differentiation in the class, that they're not going to be, tunnel vision into one way of doing things, and just creating that atmosphere of options and opportunities and autonomy in the class. Again, sort of a similar thing, just making sure that they understand that there's choices in the way they're completing assignments and assessments. And then you also, again, which you probably are already doing, but having a dependable routine in the class so that students can plan and prioritize, and then a routine for you to give them feedback. And all of those things should just be clear in the syllabus so that the students feel supported in the class and in all of their learning needs. And also so that they understand the expectations and responsibilities that they have. All right, so we'll jump right into engagement. Engagement is a huge part of class. Sometimes it's tough to get students on board, but a couple ways to do that is to recruit their interest, sustain their effort and persistence, and encourage some student self-regulation. Okay. So students are interested and engaged with content that they can be a part of, that they relate to. So you want to give them discretion and autonomy in things like the level of perceived challenge. So for instance, if you're creating an assignment and you're saying, okay, this assignment is easy and this assignment is difficult, you don't really want to do that. You don't need to say, okay, this is one way, this is another. You kind of let the students make that determination for themselves, because you may say an assignment is easy, but they might feel, okay, this isn't easy for me. I don't really understand that. So, it doesn't really make sense. You can't categorize that this will be easy for one student and not another, because also an assignment can be difficult and they might think it's easy. So it's best to just avoid that. Another thing that can happen is if you label an assignment as easy, they may say, what's the point? They might not see the value in it. They'll just say, what's the point if this is so easy? And at the same token, if you label something as difficult, they might just be scared, and it might totally prevent them from just jumping into the assignment because they're blockaded by their own nerves and their own fears. You want to give different types, again, varying adhering to the different learning needs and the different preferences of students. You want to vary the types of rewards and recognition available, or even let the students choose what they want as a reward. So typically you give out a letter grade, but say for instance, you say, okay, instead of a letter grade, you need to complete a certification. I immediately think of, for instance, like in a graphic design class, maybe you're teaching Adobe Illustrator or something like that. Instead of grading them on an Illustrator or some type of assignment, maybe they need to get a certification and be Adobe certified. And then that's something more applicable that they can use in the real world, and something that is more valuable to them. Maybe they write a poem or write an essay and it's featured in the newspaper, or maybe the assignment is write something for the newspaper rather than just write it for this class assignment. You could even, set them up with a connection to someone. and say, depending on which topic you pick, I can connect you with someone in the community or someone at Caldwell for some feedback, or just, maybe an internship or something like that. And again, these are some good options. There's a million options to choose from, but you can also let students choose that for themselves, choose what type of reward or recognition available. Now, again, it's not, students may come up with something outlandish. So it's not like you want to say, oh, do whatever you want, whatever recognition you want, but, within reason, let them be a part of that process. You want to provide choices and options for the context and content used for practicing and assessing skills. So for instance, you have one topic and they're completing it individually. They're learning about it and discussing it in a group environment, in a presentation, or they're talking about that same topic then in doing group work. So it's really providing multiple means for them to engage with the material, because again, students learn differently. Some students learn better independently. And if you just have independent projects, it will only open windows for success for some students. So just making sure that when you're looking at the topics and the content in your class, you want to provide options for completing those tasks and assessing those skills instead of funneling it into one way or another. And then you want to provide some choices in the tools used for information gathering and production. So typical books, case studies, articles, videos, just not one size fits all, giving them different mediums and different outlets, different perspectives, and different sources for where they're getting information. And then also it's a great chance for utilizing different technology and different mediums for presenting their content. So maybe, for instance, they create a blog about what they're learning instead of writing an essay. Maybe they create a website. There's a lot of really easy website generators where it's just drag and drop, create a website. Maybe they create social media pages. Maybe you show them a tool where they can create an infographic out of the things that they learned. And a good example of this would be, a student comes to you and they're an ESL student and they're not great at writing, and they don't feel confident in their ability to write an essay about whatever the topic is. So you say, oh, well, why don't you just record a video and turn the video into me, and just providing them with that option for success. Even so, some students nowadays, some of them are YouTubers. They have their own YouTube channel, and it wouldn't benefit them as much to write a paper, whereas it would benefit them professionally even to create a video and put it on their YouTube channel. So just creating the opportunity for students to utilize different resources and different mediums for themselves. You don't want to also stalemate them again in their creative process. For example, if they're creating a presentation, you don't want to say, okay, within reason, you give them guidelines, but kind of let them have that freedom and creativity. Let them express themselves and let them have the freedom of creativity, and that really helps them to engage in the material, so they're not kind of stalemated by some strict rules and guidelines like 12-point font and 15 slides. Let them kind of do their thing. It's helpful to guide students. You can provide students with timing guidelines and checklists and things like that. But again, you're providing them with the resource, but not really requiring them to use it, because while some students may benefit from that, other students may not. So it's about giving them different options and letting them choose what works best for them. So like I said before, whenever possible, you want to let them be a part of setting their own academic and behavioral goals. Sometimes you just want to kind of you determine what the students are doing, you're kind of setting the boundaries, but the idea of UDL is to let them be a part of that and let them um, be engaged in the material as much as possible because of how it relates to them personally and how it allows them to grow. Okay, again, going off of this, you want to design your activities so that the outcomes are relatable to students, so that they have real world application, and so that they reflect a purpose that is clear. Um, you want the students to have a choice in the topic in relation to their own personal lives, things that are culturally relevant. So you may want to update your sources. I'm sure you do this from semester to semester, making sure that your content is not outdated, because they can find information all over online, and you really want to have the most updated, relevant content that to provide them with. Socially relevant, age and ability appropriate, and overall they really want to they're more engaged when they relate to the content, and then they can see the value and relevance of it in their own lives. So a big part of this, and some examples of how to do this, is I always reference active learning and passive learning. So active learning would be things like presentations, group work, activities, and inquiry-based learning. So say, for example, you have a discussion prompt, and it's, okay, here's the question, and now you are required to go do a little bit of research and bring back your own insights on it, and find your own article and get them active and in learning and researching on their own and finding interests and things that they relate to and backing that up. You want to foster the use of imagination. And this is really, if there's one bullet point I would emphasize, I think in this whole presentation, it's this. I think a great way for students to be engaged is through some of these new technology tools like simulations, virtual reality, and gamification. And I would definitely encourage you to reach out to the instructional design team or the instructional technologist and in doing that, because it really engages students. I worked on a class at the last college that I worked at, and they had a virtual reality class, and it filled up like faster than any class I've ever seen. So I think as far as engagement and being on the forefront of technology, those are some great ways to get students involved with active learning and just like engagement in general, because they're ready to learn new ways and new things. Service learning is also a really great way to do this. So having real world activities rather than just your assignments that you come up with in class. Maybe you are working with the math club or something like that, and the students are coming up with an activity that is applicable to Caldwell at large, and that can be in the public eye of Caldwell, something that represents what you're learning in the classroom, but is also applicable to real life, or in just the community at large. So it's a really good opportunity for students then to also have a choice in the subject matter. If you say, hey, go find a nonprofit organization that you can work with, and we're doing this assignment, but you want it to be relatable and applicable to real world. So they will go out into the community, maybe with an organization that they're already a part of, or something new, something they're interested in, and really get them engaged in something that they have a choice in. And then again, then they see the relevance and value of that, and they can apply it to the real world and make the learning about their needs and their interests. Another great way to show relevance and value in and which promotes the engagement for your students is to get testimonials from your past students, your students that are already in the workforce, and they're using some of these skills and they're applying some of these skills in their own jobs and their professional lives. Get them to come in as a guest speaker, maybe have them record a video and talk about how they're applying what they're learning to their current professional lives. And I underlined and bolded the S because, again, we're reiterating the value of providing options and seeing things from different perspectives. So, finding students that, past students that work in different lines of work and different fields, so that students can have different perspectives and relate in different ways. Because again, not all students are different. Not all students have the same interests. In your class, you also want to minimize the threats and distractions. Something you probably already do, but you want to create an acceptive and supportive learning environment. Kind of funny, but I say a smile kind of goes a long way. You want to be personable and open to the students, maybe share a little bit about yourself, have a joke here and there, just to, it seems like a basic concept, but you just want them to be open and welcoming. It really goes a long way. A lot of students are kind of scared and nervous. They may not seem like it, but they can be, especially in online learning as well, because you don't have that face-to-face interaction. So it does go a long way. So you all want to verbally state that it's a supportive environment and promote supportive tools and provide constructive feedback for the students and encourage them. And encourage also the students to have the same approach. So not just you, but also the students saying, okay, we have a collaborative and supportive work environment. We're all working together. We're all in this together, and we all need to act that way and kind of set a standard to make the environment open and supportive for everyone. I think it goes a long way to just sometimes explicitly state things like that. Because it, again, like some students are very nervous. And I guess I kind of speak from experience, because I remember when I was, anytime I approach a new class at times, I'm a little nervous. So a smile goes a long way. Okay, again, so keyword here, varying. Within your class, and this is the key concepts of UDL, is to provide options for students. So you want to vary the input of new and predictable information. So visually, you want to you can create charts, checklists, calendars, and things that increase the predictability of daily activities. So I mentioned, so a good example of this would maybe be, in your Blackboard class, for instance, maybe you have a weekly summary page. And that would go into detail explaining, the assignments, the activities, and giving a lot of little details about everything. And it's more of in a written format with some pictures and things like that. But also, on the other hand, you've created that great document, but it's also helpful for other students to have things like a checklist, because it's just simpler for them. It's easier for them to read. It's less overwhelming visually. You want to accommodate to those differences in learning preferences and organizational preferences. And also utilizing alerts, things like Blackboard alerts, due dates in Blackboard, announcements, and even, emails. If something changes, you're sending your students emails and making sure that you're providing different outlets for them to see what's happening in the class visually or written, verbally. Yes. Um, it's helpful also then to have class routine. So you don't really want things to be kind of unexpected, although that does happen, but it's helpful and a little bit comforting for students to have kind of a structure to the class. Maybe you have a couple readings, videos, quiz, written assignment, discussion board, and then you kind of follow that from week to week, so that they have like a little bit of predictability in the setup of the class. And it's also really helpful too to have visuals. I put a concept map because at times it's hard for students to visualize all the overarching goals and overarching messages that you have. So again, from week to week, maybe students are understanding this, but and seeing the accumulation of ideas, but it can be also helpful to represent those things visually for other students who just tend to learn better that way. Okay, so you again want to vary the level of sensory information. You don't want to sensory overload your students. Some have some short assignments and some lengthy assignments. You want to allow for breaks, and provide variation in the due dates and the pace of assignments. And again, just adhering to the different learning needs. So some suggestions would be, rather than having chapters and chapters of readings, maybe make some little micro learning videos to reiterate basic concepts and overarching points, so that they have a little variation in shorter lessons and longer lessons. It's really helpful to include the timing expectations, because then students can envision, okay, this is going to take 30 minutes to complete. This is going to take 15 minutes to complete. This is going to take an hour to complete. And really, breaking those up into longer and shorter assignments, creating that variation adheres to the different learning styles. Some people, just need a little quick refresher on things, where others need to really delve into a topic. Again, focusing on the process, breaking things down into smaller parts is easier for some people to comprehend along the way, rather than just focusing on the end product and overwhelming your students. You want to vary the demands, the social demands. So a lot of times, like I mentioned before, maybe you have an assignment that is, even if you're a communications teacher, and a lot of your assignments are public writing assignments, or just publicly display things. Maybe you make a social media page or what have you. But not all the assignments should be that way. Not all the assignments should be public to each other in the classroom, where the students are looking at each other's work. You want to vary that, and to create some comfortability for students who don't always want their work in the public eye, even though it could be important for the class. You want to involve your students in the whole discussion. So Q&A sessions during class, that gives you the opportunity to ask questions and really kind of call on students, and making sure they're involved, or having the opportunity for them to ask you questions. A great thing to utilize is polling features, because even if a student is shy, they're able to raise their hand. That they're there and they're participating. I always recommend group activities during class. So you could have little breakout groups where the students are required to complete a task by the end of the session, so that that they're participating and they're being active during the class time. They're not just kind of sitting idly by, passively. And also it's really helpful to encourage peer replies in the discussion board. to keep the conversation going. If a student isn't comfortable talking in class, you give them that option. Again, it's about the options. Okay, maybe they're not comfortable speaking during class, but they have the opportunity to talk and continue the conversation in a discussion board. And then it's helpful also to talk about the discussion board during class, and don't just let it be just online discussion, and just give the opportunity for to take that conversation out of the forum and into the classroom, so students can talk verbally about it. Um, Very important to clearly state your learning outcomes for the course, and really analyze them. It's important to focus, not only for you to focus on the learning outcomes, because you want to make sure that none of your assignments or articles or anything are necessarily useless. You want to make sure that they all meet a goal, but also it's really helpful for students because they then see the purpose, and they're able to break down long-term goals into short-term objectives. So they see the overarching goals of the class, but then within each assignment, they can see what are the short-term objectives, and they can find purpose in that. I recommend using the Bloom's taxonomy verbs because they're measurable. What can you, so you want to state it by the end of this course, by the end of this assignment, you will be able to do this. And that really motivates student. Okay, I'm going to be able to do this by the end of this assignment, or they have that in mind. It's up to them. They make that determination that they're going to be able to do something by the end of the assignment. You want a way to, again, heighten the importance of these is to just explicitly ask them to restate the goal, so that it's clear, so that you know that they understand what the goal is. You want to display the goal in multiple ways. So you want to write it out. You want to write it out next to the assignment description. You want to provide sample work, a couple options. You can use prompts or scaffolds for visualizing and achieving the outcome. So scaffolding is basically like talking about the problem and working through it, and verbally discussing the process of how you're coming to the resolve of a problem or issue. And then you would scaffold the task in one way, and then let them kind of do the work on their own and be there for support. And as students, they also want to display the goal in multiple ways. So for example, you have them write an essay, but also create an image to display the message verbally. So that's, certain students shine and kind of accumulate their skills in writing and in a visual display. Maybe your student has great drawing skills, and they're just, it really aids to their essay by creating a drawing and creating a visual message, just really highlighting their skills. And then, just kind of point blankly having a discussion with the students about what constitutes excellence, and letting them be a part of that, letting them understand that, and be part of that discourse on what constitutes excellence, or a good grade in the class. Creating a community is also a huge part of engagement. Group work is a big way to do this. You want to create expectations for these group works. Allowing them to choose their roles in the group is really important, rather than just assigning roles based on your personal assessments of the students, and letting them kind of have the freedom to choose what they want to do. You can have, like I mentioned in the beginning, survey students to find their common interests and create groups based on that. Allow self sign-up groups. Sometimes that's kind of discouraged because sometimes there's this predisposition that working with friends isn't always the best option, but sometimes, but it can be, and I think they are more engaged and have more fun when they're working with their friends. So it's best to not discourage that. And then definitely providing opportunities for peer interactions and support. So peer feedback, um, exchanging essays, and maybe completing a form about evaluating their peers and how they did on that essay. Um, Evaluations like, oh, so we had five group members. How well did this person perform in the group? How much did they contribute? And just kind of having that precedent of being an active member of the community and the active participant in their group. And then in a discussion board reply, an example of this would be to reply to a post of your choice. And it encourages the students to read more of the posts and find something that they can reply to and find interest in, and reply with more engagement and enthusiasm than, okay, reply to the person right after you, or something like that. And then another thing would be to have the students incorporate their background knowledge and past experiences, sharing that with the group, and being proud of what they've accomplished in the past, or just being able to teach each other about what they know is helpful for not only them, but like the other students in the class as well. You want to differentiate the degree of difficulty. So without stating it, you want to have a little bit of easier assignments, and then more complex assignments. You want to give them different tools and approaches for the work. Letting them know, okay, here's some options for some tech tools like text to speech for writing, Prezi for presentations, the Google Suite for collaborative work, or social media platforms, and just kind of making it known that you're open to letting them using these different technologies. Really, gives them the encouragement to complete their assignments. And then having things that are more fun, like short story writing, song writing, video projects, things like that. Just allowing them to be more creative in completing tasks. On your end, UDL really focuses on a different kind of language when you're providing feedback. It's really not focusing on errors or, rights and wrongs, but encouraging self-awareness and self-regulation, identifying patterns of error, and just encouraging positivity and strategies for success. You don't really want to compare or contrast the students, and say, oh, you should have done this. This is correct. This is the right way. This is the wrong way. But you want to emphasize effort and improvement, and again, just being positive rather than just kind of analyzing their performance. And this is also, hopefully, you're doing this already, but you want to provide feedback to the students that is frequent, timely, and specific for the students and you. So you want to make sure that you have the time to give them timely feedback. Don't have something due when you can't give them the feedback until 2 weeks later, which hopefully is not the case. But just making sure that they get the feedback in time for their next assignment, so that things can accumulate. Overall, you want to create this culture of explanation instead of a culture of the right answer. So it's a little bit of changing the verbiage and the way you're approaching students and encouraging them, so that they can master the task at hand. So you want to motivate the students, giving them rubrics, reminders, checklists, encouraging, them to find a determination in the face of distractions. You want them to constantly be reflecting on themselves. You can have self-reflection papers, like how well do you think you did this? How did you feel about this assignment? You can offer coaches or mentors, guest speakers, or other inspirational guests in your class that might motivate them and give them a little bit more engagement in the material. And then again, having them reflect and have personal reflection, and really focusing on identifying their own personal goals. Examples of this is journaling, blogging, writing reflections, and self-evaluations. So another thing to keep in mind, and this may be a little bit new, is to kind of emotionally guide students as well. Something I find helpful is to begin the session with a calm moment and set a tone for the lesson, where you say, okay, what do you want to feel during the lesson? Do you want to feel motivated? Do you want to feel like you're recapping information? Do you want to feel excited? And just letting them channel that feeling throughout what they're learning. And then having them identify, what do you want to get out of this activity? If they're identifying that and focusing on it, they'll carry that throughout the session. And then you want to create opportunities for clarity and direction. So you want office hours that are suitable for adults, for students. Maybe you have a couple office hours in varying times and making sure you're available for them. You could have a muddiest point discussion board, which kind of allows for students to say, okay, we learned all of this information, but these are the points that I was unclear about. I need a little clarity on that. And that just, prevents them from being confused and left lingering about things that then they need clarity on throughout the rest of the class. Okay, so we're here at the end. Just in summary, when it comes to UDL, you want to focus on optimizing students' choices in the learning environment, making the content and activities relatable to all the students. And you do this by varying topics, having active learning practices, and allowing for creative freedoms. You want to minimize distractions by creating a welcoming environment and a classroom community that's goal-oriented and provides varying opportunities and resources for students and for student success. And it's very important for students to self-reflect and find self-motivation, all the while when you are providing constructive feedback to students along the way. And overall, remembering that UDL aims to improve and optimize learning for all people. So today we covered engagement. So, and I kind of touched upon some items from the sessions that would be recognition and action and expression, but I encourage you to join me for those sessions in the next upcoming weeks. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to stop sharing. Okay. Hi. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of open things up to questions. If you guys have any questions or comments about anything, feel free to let me know. Or any feedback or.
I do have a question.
Sure.
Brianna, I know you mentioned social media.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any platform that is recommended? I mean, students do use Facebook, they do use Twitter, they do use Snapchat nowadays a lot.
Yeah, I would say that it kind of depends on what you're doing. So I think of, so really what you want to do with engagement is get something that the students are really interested in. So for instance, if they, and something that's applicable to them. So A lot of students really like Instagram. Okay, so maybe they are creating an Instagram account, and I guess that could be really on anything. Say you have a political science class, and they're creating maybe like a campaign page um, for a candidate that they make up. They want to market them and really put that into application. So that could be one example. I mean, I guess it's really just circumstantial. I think something probably really valuable for all students is developing their LinkedIn, because that's important once they graduate. It's really applicable to their lives. They can use that going forward.
Yeah, so the reason I'm asking is a lot of students are comfortable. So I'm trying to find a platform. I did find one, but I know it's probably costs money and it
Mm-hmm.
might not come into play. So the main reason I'm asking this, of course, the free platforms are Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, those.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the students are comfortable posting on Facebook. They're not
Mm-hmm.
comfortable posting on discussion forum, even though it might be similar. So having this somehow integrated would be great. That way, it's one place to go to.
Um,
There's something called Packback. I'll post the link
okay.
on the chat in a minute. And basically, Packback is similar to Facebook in a platform wise.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be a good way to integrate that and have that available. But I don't think it would happen because it does cost money. And students, of course, will not pay for it.
Mm-hmm. Well, sometimes, there's also like free options, like they could make a website. So there's things like Wix or Weebly, that they don't doesn't really require a lot of, well, maybe that wouldn't be applicable for you because you're teaching computer science, but
Right.
things like that. Or there is a I'm thinking of one. I can't think of the name of it. It's more of like a graphic design based, or like portfolio based um, social media platform. And I'm just going to look it up quickly.
LinkedIn?
Behance, I think it's called.
I'm sorry?
I think it's called Behance. Yeah. There's a site called Behance, which isn't really as public, but but it can be a really good source. There's also Dribble with 3 B's. And that is helpful because I think that you can get like freelance jobs from it. Although there may be, you may have to be like invited to that by someone who has an account. They may have to invite you. But yeah, again, it just depends because of the topic and the what subject you're teaching, because there could be a variety of sources for social media. But
Okay.
I think social media is like a really great motivator because it puts that social pressure on students to do good work because it's in the public eye, where there's like, you're just turning something into the teacher and that's the only person who's seeing it.
Right.
So, yeah.
And that's why they probably feel more, oh, I don't really have to, or I don't like to do it, or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like not motivating.
Yes.
And even in a sense, you could utilize the discussion board in a way that's like that. If they're posting something on the discussion board, they know the whole class is going to see it. So I really think, and even in general, even in an experience, I have seen the students really like put the time into it. They don't just take it lightly. I mean, I'm sure, you can't be, we're not magicians, but but I think that they like to be seen and understood by their peers. It's like a big part of that. And, you know, it creates that sense of community. And I always recommend replies for students. It's kind of tough to, UDL doesn't always say, okay, you're required to reply to 2 people. But like I said, finding those moments where they can read through and find ones that they relate to
Right.
is more helpful. I think they probably, first of all, read more of them because they're looking for that one that they want to reply to. And maybe also suggesting, hey, don't just reply to the same person every single week. Kind of guiding them those ways rather than saying, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this, but
Right.
like giving them those freedoms is
Right.
helpful.
No, I mean, the way I do it, I ask them to summarize a topic and then find 2 people you want to reply to. And same as you mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
I ask them not to do the same one every week.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes what that happens is, or what it blocks is, they want to work with that person. It gives them their interaction with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I do it that way.
Well, another thing you could do is at the end of when the students write their post out, at the end of it, they can sort of follow up with a question. So they'll write out their response, and then at the end they can pose a question that the next student has to answer. So that kind of like initiates the conversation and keeps the conversation going.
Right.
And then another thing, like I mentioned, is even if they're not replying to, they may choose specific ones to reply to, but then in class, you know, you would have read through most of them, and then you can kind of pick ones to talk about in class. So even if they didn't dive into that conversation, they may still have that opportunity to talk about it during class. So the conversation just doesn't end there. That's what I recommend with discussion boards, because sometimes it does tend to just be one place or another. Like the conversation's just on the discussion board and the conversation's just in class, but like combining those, again, this goes back to the whole concept of UDL, is just kind of keeping the platform open and making it more available and malleable for students who perform differently and need a little bit more guidance in both of those settings.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times what happens is students, when you do give that freedom, I've noticed also, is they want specific guidelines.
Yeah.
So it's a different environment. But I mean, no, I understand.
I think it's good to give the guidelines, but allowing them to relate it to themselves. Like, you know, you provide guidelines for, okay, I want you to touch upon like this topic, but maybe find something that is more relatable to you. Just kind of like a little bit of a one-off, rather than, you know, just like tunnel visioning them, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Completely. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I can't hear you, Patty. You're muted.
I found that helpful too when you were talking a bit, you know, about the various multiple ways that you can work with. Sorry, I'm losing you guys there. I just tapped on my screen. But the ability to use various cues, including visuals and icons throughout the course and throughout the lessons. Mm-hmm. And I try to create these little visual icons. I love the ones that you use because it gives them a way to locate their eye and minds to the information at the same time. So on that note, one thing that struck me while you were giving your lessons was this idea of giving Blackboard alerts. Mm-hmm. I keep emailing students, you know, twice a week, and it gets a little redundant. Mm-hmm. And it feels a little bit pedantic to them. And I'm wondering too, for instance, is there a way, Brianna, for us to do voice threads as a Blackboard alert, or use maybe some icon pop-ups in Blackboard? in order to kind of cue students back into the weekly scaffolding and platforming of assignments. So they feel less being told what to do, that they're feeling a little bit more driven by their own interests and guidelines.
Do you mean like, so do you mean in like the wiki page, like kind of identifying the points, like say you have videos here and you have like a video icon, or do you mean like an alert saying this assignment is due, here's an alert?
That's what I was thinking more. You know, that it may be sort of, you were talking about the possibility of being creative with how you even cue students to due dates, since they are important, because in the applied world, the real world application, they are, even though we can be a little bit flexible with the due date, there are due dates and deadlines for work that they're going to have to get used to, and they actually like that. But sometimes they're so busy, they may lose track and they may forget. So I just thought it might be, yeah, like some kind of video maybe that goes up and kind of reaches them impromptu or at a certain time or date that's a little bit entertaining, or some way to approach that in a way that's more icon driven or more visual, instead of the same, to the same point that you guys were making with you and Dipesh about the fact that, you know, they maybe need something a little bit more creative than just the discussion board in Blackboard. These other options, maybe even in just checking in with students and communicating when things are due or what is due. That Blackboard has some things that might be a little bit more multidisciplinary.
So I think that Blackboard, depending on the student's settings, they should be able to have if you assign a due date to your assignment, I believe that it adds it to like their calendar. And I'm just going to preface this by saying that I've used Blackboard, but I am really came with a background in Canvas, so I'm still kind of learning these things too. But from what I know, I think it generates a calendar and should, if they have settings as students, it should give them reminders. So sometimes, and I would encourage you to ask Bridget about this, and because she kind of will help. She's the kind of go-to person, and I can help you too, but she's like more of the technologist part, where she can help you get the setup of your class and things like that correct. But on that note, it does help. In my past experience working as an instructional technologist and instructional designer, regardless of Blackboard or what platform you're using, it's helpful to provide a resource for students in the beginning of how they can set up their notifications and their Blackboard settings. So some students turn these things off. Like even if you send it an announcement, like they turn that setting off. So I think it's helpful to reiterate those points at first and set the expectation that they are going to need to like look for these alerts and things like that. And then also visually, like even in your wiki pages, you know, if you're like visually thinking about drawing something out and having that stand out in the wiki page, that's helpful. I'm a fan of checklists, if that's possible to incorporate, because it's just a different way of in visualizing things. I know I personally work off of checklists all the time, so if I was provided with that option, it would just work better for me, whereas someone else might just throw it away. But again, having like those options is really helpful. But I would definitely recommend, you know, that could be something that you talk about in the course intro session, or in your course intro video, saying, okay, I'm going to be doing this, you know, make sure you have this setting. And maybe, I know that Bridget and the team, they've already come up with a lot of resources that they have available that maybe you can include like a little video in, you know, your welcome page or something like that. That could be helpful.
Thank you. That was a real standout too. The idea of the video, the welcome video, and also working with icons and checklists, because it condenses it, but more, it has the ability to hold their eyes and minds at the same time.
Yeah, in my experience, I've always used icons. I mean, I have a background in graphic design, so anytime I've worked in an environment like this, like everybody is like, where can can you create some icons for me? And I'm always like, I would love to. So I always end up doing that, which is great. I love that. But I also think it's really helpful,
Yes.
having the visual representation. I mean, it's seeing a page full of text is just overwhelming. It's just for, I think most people, I mean, everyone learns differently, but I think for most people, I would say that that's definitely helpful. And just even like call outs, like, you have a big assignment coming up and it's just like, even changing the font size and the font color, things like that, is really helpful.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
Bye, Lauren. Bye, Depeche.
Bye. Take care. Have a
Take
good
care.
day. Yeah.
I think Robert's in here twice. um, but yeah, is there anything I mean, there's so many ways to engage students. And sometimes, I really feel like you can do so much. So I would say in designing your course and thinking about these things, sometimes it's a little overwhelming. What am I telling you to do? I'm saying, okay, provide different options for the same thing. Okay, that seems like a lot of work. And really, it is. It's a little bit more work that you put in the beginning. But in the end, and I probably should have mentioned this to everyone, but I think when you put that effort in the beginning and provide that, you have less questions in the end. Like students their questions are answered. They don't have to come with you with confusion because you've provided them with all these resources and all these options that in the end, makes it easier for them and just gives them the opportunity to shine. I really like the idea, even the example of a student, like an ESL student, not being able to write clearly, but like they shouldn't be stalemated by their inability to write. I mean, they could be the smartest person in the class, but they don't have great English. And just because you can't read whatever language that they know fluently, it just shouldn't halt them. So maybe they make a video and they explain that, and that's even better. Maybe they have a YouTube channel. That would be a great thing. I could have told suggested for social media, having students make their own YouTube channel, because YouTube isn't really, it's not like you post a YouTube video and like everyone sees it. It's only those who follow you. So I think that is a really great resource, and it's something visual, something that students can put in their portfolio. I mean, is more modern. I mean, even in applying for a job, if a student made a portfolio for themselves and they are just listing their papers, that's great. But if they also have videos and things, it just gives them a little more credibility and a little more versatility, especially in today's age, because everyone's moving towards the digital. So, well, I think you're the last one on here. I don't know that Robert's here. Oh, oh yeah,
Thank
of
you.
course. Oh, of course, yes.
Yeah, I am here. I've been mostly muted.
Oh, there you
And just for the purposes of a more orderly meeting, trying to send my information via text as opposed to talking, but I
go.
am
Okay.
here. And thank you for all of what you've said. I
Oh,
did express a couple concerns via chat, and I guess you were addressing that.
okay.
The issue of grading things consistently when you've got apples and oranges is kind of a difficult problem.
Yes, it is. And so that's actually a really great question. I think, so first of all, yes, you definitely want to be teaching students the proper English, and there's obviously, you don't want to lose sight of those things. But like I said before too, it does take a little bit more effort to achieve this goal of a UDL class. So maybe you have a couple different rubrics for grading things. And that's just, you know, I mean, they'd be similar, but a little bit different. But again, it's just putting in the effort into your class so that the students have the opportunity to succeed. And I think that's really just like the overarching message, is opening that opportunity for the students to succeed. So by whatever means necessary, even if it requires a little bit of flexibility on your end, in grading and being available for students, it's worth it. And
Yeah.
hopefully they
Well,
appreciate it.
I guess it's ultimately a matter of balance. You know,
Mhm.
how do you provide enough flexibility to engage more students and get the best out of them, but at the
Mhm.
same time hold them to consistent standards?
Exactly.
You know, it involves judgment, you know,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
that's the thing about teaching is it is an art,
Right.
and you know,
Um,
you can't boil that down endlessly into, you know, algorithms and stuff like that. It's an art.
But I mean, by no means, it's not like it's like a free for all. It's just being a little bit flexible. You know, you
Yeah,
don't let
balance.
students
Yeah,
exactly the balance. Yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well,
Well,
thanks, Robert. It was nice to meet you.
yes, if we can call this meeting, yeah,
Yeah.
maybe we'll meet in person one of these days. Okay.
Exactly.
Bye
Okay.
bye.
Take
Thank you very
care.
much.
Thanks. Hey, Sahilia, I don't know if you're still there. If you want to touch base, I'm going to stop the recording.